Chapter 1. The Blueprint of Human Connection. Have you ever watched two strangers become best friends? Or perhaps you have walked into a crowded room and instantly felt drawn to someone without them saying a single word. We often call this chemistry. We treat it like magic. We assume it is a rare, mystical alignment of the stars that happens only to the lucky few, something granted by chance rather than cultivated by choice. But what if that perspective is entirely wrong? What if the profound human connection we all crave is not magic at all, but a predictable, observable, and masterable blueprint? Think about the person you consider your closest ally right now. If you rewind the tape of your life, you will find a distinct moment when they were nothing more than a face in the crowd. How did they cross the bridge from being a stranger to becoming an essential part of your world? Most of us never pause to dissect this process. We simply let life happen to us, bumping into people and hoping a connection sparks. But when you understand the mechanics of human bonding, you stop waiting for relationships to materialize by accident. You learn how to build them with intention. Every relationship, whether it is a lifelong romance, an unbreakable friendship, or a powerful professional alliance, rests on four invisible pillars. When these four elements align, defensive walls crumble. Trust is established organically. Connection becomes inevitable. These pillars are proximity, frequency, duration, and intensity. Let us look at the foundation first. Proximity. This is simply the shared physical or digital space between you and another human being. It seems almost too simple to mention, but it is the absolute bedrock of all trust. Imagine you are sitting at a quiet neighborhood coffee shop. You go there every Tuesday morning to read or work. Across the room, there is someone else who also comes in every Tuesday. You do not speak. You do not even exchange a polite glance at first, but simply by occupying the same environment, the ancient survival mechanisms in the brain begin to register safety. The human mind is hardwired to fear the unknown and to find comfort in the familiar. By intentionally placing yourself in the proximity of others, you are silently whispering to their subconscious, assuring them that you are safe, predictable, and present. You are laying the groundwork for a relationship before a single greeting is ever exchanged. But proximity alone is merely a shared zip code. To build a bond, we must add the second pillar, frequency. This is the rhythm of your presence. Think about the difference between a torrential downpour that lasts 5 minutes and a gentle, steady rain that lasts for hours. The heavy rain runs off the hard, dry soil, leaving the roots untouched. But the steady, consistent rain seeps deep into the earth, softening the ground and nourishing the plant. Frequency is that steady rain. It is the repeated, consistent exposure to another person. It is not about grand, sweeping gestures or overwhelming displays of personality. It is about the subtle nod in the hallway, the shared smile in the elevator, the quiet, consistent presence day after day. When you increase the frequency of your interactions, you dramatically accelerate the feeling of familiarity. The stranger smoothly transitions into an acquaintance, and the acquaintance becomes a comforting fixture in their daily reality. As the rhythm of frequency builds, we must introduce the third pillar, duration. This is the amount of uninterrupted time you spend in those interactions. If frequency is how often you water a garden, duration is how deeply you allow the roots to grow in one sitting. Imagine running into a colleague at the water cooler every single day for exactly 30 seconds. The frequency is incredibly high, but the duration is incredibly low. You might recognize their face, know their coffee order, and exchange pleasantries about the weather, but you do not truly know their mind. Now imagine sitting next to someone on a turbulent 5-hour cross-country flight. The frequency is practically zero. It is just one single isolated interaction, but the duration is massive. In those 5 uninterrupted hours, the sheer length of time forces a shedding of superficial layers. People begin to talk about their fears, their families, and their dreams. When you intentionally extend the duration of your presence with someone, you signal to them that they are worthy of your most valuable, non-renewable resource, your time. Finally, we reach the engine that powers this entire blueprint. Intensity. You can share a space with someone every day for a year, clocking countless hours of proximity, frequency, and duration, but without intensity, they will remain a ghost passing through the corridors of your life. Intensity is the emotional weight and psychological depth of an interaction. It is the quality of your focus. Let us imagine you are at a loud, chaotic social gathering. You are speaking to someone, pouring your heart out about a project you are passionate about. But as you speak, you notice their eyes darting over your shoulder, scanning the room to see if someone more important has arrived. The proximity, frequency, and duration might all be present in that conversation, but the intensity is absolute zero. The connection dies instantly in the cold air of their distraction. Now, flip the scenario. Picture someone asking you a simple question, but as you answer, they lock eyes with you. They lean forward. They nod slowly, absorbing your words. The noisy room seems to fade away, and for that brief shining moment, you feel like the only person in their universe. That is intensity. It is the emotional spark that ignites the foundation you have so carefully built. It makes the other person feel seen, heard, and deeply valued. When you learn to weave these four elements together, you are no longer leaving human connection to the whims of fate. You are actively designing an environment where trust, respect, and deep affection can flourish. Furthermore, this blueprint serves as an incredible diagnostic tool. If you find a once close relationship beginning to fade and wither, you do not have to guess why. You can look at the blueprint. Have you lost proximity due to a move or a job change? Has the frequency of your conversations dropped? Are your interactions rushed, lacking duration? Or have you stopped being fully present, letting the intensity go cold? By mastering these four pillars, you gain the extraordinary ability to foster warmth and genuine rapport with anyone, anywhere. But building this architectural foundation requires something more. Before you can deeply engage with someone, you must pass their internal, subconscious security checks. You must master the silent signals we constantly broadcast to the world, the unspoken language that dictates whether someone will open their door to you or lock it tight. Chapter 2. The Silent Language of Trust. The moment you walk into a crowded room, before you take off your coat, before you clear your throat, and long before you utter a single syllable, you have already spoken volumes. You have announced your mood, your intentions, and your level of confidence. Most importantly, you have told every single person in that room whether you are safe to approach. This happens instantaneously, silently, and entirely without your conscious permission. It happens because the human brain is an ancient, incredibly efficient prediction machine hardwired by millions of years of evolution to perform one primary task: keeping you alive. Long before our ancestors developed complex language to negotiate or express affection, they relied on a flawless, silent survival mechanism. When early humans encountered another person in the wild, their brains had to make a split-second calculation, categorizing the approaching figure into one of three distinct boxes: friend, foe, or ignore. Today, while we navigate office buildings and coffee shops instead of jungles and plains, our brains are running the exact same ancient software. Every time you lock eyes with a stranger, your subconscious is furiously searching for specific microscopic signals to determine which of those three boxes to put them in. If your body language broadcasts tension, a clenched jaw, a furrowed brow, a rigid posture, or an intense, unblinking stare, you are inadvertently sending out faux signals. The people around you will feel an inexplicable sense of unease. Their primitive brains will register a threat, and they will physically distance themselves from you, even if they cannot articulate exactly why. On the other hand, if you walk into a room with your shoulders slumped, your gaze fixed firmly on the floor, or glued to the glowing screen of your smartphone, you are broadcasting heavy ignore signals. You are telling the room that you are closed off, unavailable, and uninterested in connection. The world will gladly oblige, leaving you entirely alone in a sea of people. But there is a third category. There is a specific, beautifully subtle sequence of nonverbal cues that bypasses all human defense mechanisms. These are the friend signals. When you learn to intentionally deploy these silent gestures, you become a magnet for positive human interaction. You disarm people before you even say hello. The most powerful and universally recognized of these signals is the eyebrow flash. It happens in a fraction of a second, a rapid, subtle raising and lowering of the eyebrows. Across almost every culture on Earth, this fleeting movement is the ultimate biological sign of recognition and non-threat. Think about the last time you saw someone you genuinely love and haven't seen in a long time. As your eyes met from across the street, before you smiled, before you called out their name, your eyebrows instinctively darted upward. It is an involuntary expression of delight. But here is the secret of the silent language. You do not have to wait for an involuntary reaction to use it. When you lock eyes with someone new, offering a subtle, gentle eyebrow flash sends a powerful, subconscious message to their brain. It says, I see you, I recognize you, and I am safe. It instantly lowers their emotional drawbridge. Following closely behind the eyebrow flash is the head tilt. To understand the profound impact of this gesture, you must understand human anatomy. The carotid arteries run down both sides of our neck, carrying the lifeblood to our brains. Exposing this highly vulnerable area is the ultimate biological display of trust. You see this in the animal kingdom constantly. When a dog rolls over and exposes its neck, it is signaling absolute submission and comfort. Humans do this too, albeit more subtly. When you tilt your head slightly to the side while listening or looking at someone, you're silently communicating that you feel completely safe in their presence. By offering them your trust, you inevitably invite them to trust you in return. It softens your appearance, strips away intimidation, and makes you deeply approachable. Then, of course, there is the smile. But we must be very careful here, because not all smiles are created equal. We all possess a polite, social smile. It is the one we plaster on our faces when we pass a co-worker in the hallway, or when a photographer tells us to say cheese. A polite smile uses only the muscles around the mouth. It is flat, it is functional, and the human brain can spot it as a forgery from a mile away. A true smile, often called a Duchenne smile, is entirely different. A true smile cannot be faked with the mouth alone. It must live in the eyes. When you experience genuine joy, your cheeks push upward, causing the skin around the corners of your eyes to crinkle. If the eyes do not crinkle, the brain of the person looking at you will subconsciously register the smile as forced, or worse, deceptive. To build immediate trust, you must learn to smile with your entire face. You must find a reason to feel genuine warmth for the person in front of you, allowing that warmth to travel all the way up to the corners of your eyes. Imagine walking into a sprawling, intimidating social gathering. Perhaps it's a high-stakes networking event or a neighborhood party where you know absolutely no one. The natural human instinct is to protect yourself. You might cross your arms to create a physical barrier over your vital organs. You might angle your body toward the nearest exit, subconsciously preparing for an escape. You might hide behind a drink, clutching it tightly to your chest. Without realizing it, you have transformed yourself into an unapproachable fortress. Now, imagine consciously flipping the script. You take a deep breath and lower your arms, letting them rest comfortably at your sides. You leave your torso open and unguarded, demonstrating absolute physical comfort. Instead of standing parallel to the people you meet, which can feel adversarial and confrontational, you slightly angle your body, leaving open space that invites them to step in. As you catch someone's eye, you offer a fraction of a second eyebrow flash, followed by a warm, eye-crinkling smile and a gentle tilt of your head. The transformation in the room will feel almost miraculous. You will watch as strangers drop their guarded postures. You will see tension melt from their faces. People will naturally gravitate toward you, drawn in by the overwhelming sense of safety and warmth you are broadcasting. You have not manipulated them. You have simply spoken to their deepest, most ancient instincts in a language they perfectly understand. Mastering this silent language is like preparing the soil before you plant a garden. You are creating the perfect, fertile conditions for a relationship to take root. But once you have successfully signaled that you are a friend, once the approach is made and the barriers are down, you must know what to do next. You must understand the emotional core of why humans choose to bond with one another, a simple yet profoundly challenging philosophy that governs every successful relationship on Earth. Chapter 3. the core philosophy of magnetism. Every interaction you have is a moment of truth. Think about a time you walked away from a conversation feeling 10 feet tall. You felt witty, insightful, and deeply energized. As you drove home, you probably thought to yourself, I really like that person. But if you pause and dissect the anatomy of that interaction, you will discover a profound psychological truth. You did not necessarily walk away liking them because of who they were. You walked away liking them because of who you were in their presence. This brings us to the absolute core philosophy of human magnetism. If you want people to be naturally, irresistibly drawn to you, your primary goal must not be to impress them. Your primary goal must be to make them feel profoundly good about themselves. It sounds like a piece of advice so simple it borders on the obvious. Yet, in the theater of real life, it is incredibly difficult to execute. Why? Because human beings are inherently, biologically egocentric. We all carry a secret, silent belief that the universe revolves around our experiences, our struggles, and our triumphs. When we enter a conversation, we are usually just waiting for our turn to speak. We want to prove that we are smart, funny, and worthy of attention. We listen just long enough to find an opening to insert our own story. But true magnetism requires a radical shift in perspective. You must temporarily suspend your ego. You must deliberately step out of the spotlight and intentionally shine it on the person standing in front of you. When you make someone else the star of the show, their defensive walls drop, and an authentic bond begins to form. How do we actually achieve this without sounding patronizing or unnatural? The answer lies in the subtle art of the empathic statement. When someone shares an experience with us, our default instinct is often to hijack the narrative in an attempt to relate. If an acquaintance says they had a grueling, stressful week, we instinctively reply, I know exactly how you feel. I worked 60 hours last week and I am exhausted. In our desperate attempt to build a bridge of commonality, we accidentally steal their moment. We invalidate their unique experience by making it about us. An empathic statement does the exact opposite. It reflects the other person's reality back to them, validating their emotional state without shifting the focus. Imagine you are standing at a crowded, chaotic neighborhood gathering. You strike up a conversation with someone who mentions they just finished coordinating a massive, months-long charity drive for the local school. They look tired, but there is a spark of pride in their eyes. Instead of talking about a project you once managed, or simply saying, good job, you look at them intently and say, so you must be feeling an incredible sense of relief and pride right now. Notice the phrasing. By leading with a reflective observation, you keep the conversational camera firmly pointed at their emotional experience. You are silently telling them, I see the weight of what you just accomplished, and your experience matters. The other person will naturally lean in. They will feel understood, validated, and respected on a deeply human level. They will not recognize the mechanics of your communication. They will simply register that talking to you feels incredibly comforting. This core philosophy extends deeply into how we offer praise. We are often taught to use flattery to win favor, but direct flattery is a dangerous game. The human brain is highly sensitive to manipulation and insincerity. If you shower a colleague or a new acquaintance with unearned or overly enthusiastic compliments, their internal alarm bells will immediately ring. They will wonder what you want from them, or they will assume you are simply patronizing them. The masterstroke of human magnetism is not complimenting someone directly, but setting the conversational stage so they organically compliment themselves. Picture a coworker who has just spent 3 sleepless nights designing a complex, highly stressful presentation for a major client. If you walk up to their desk and say, you are a genius and the hardest worker I have ever met, they will likely deflect the praise, downplay their effort, or question your sincerity. But suppose you approach them, acknowledge the massive stack of papers on their desk, and say, it takes a massive amount of dedication and mental resilience to pull all of those moving parts together under such an impossible deadline. You have not directly called them dedicated or resilient. You have simply stated a universal truth about the nature of the monumental task they just completed. But internally, that coworker will immediately absorb the truth of your statement. They will think to themselves, Yes, it does take immense dedication, and I did it. I really am resilient. You have handed them the brush, and they have painted their own masterpiece. When people arrive at a positive conclusion about themselves in your presence, they associate that soaring feeling of self-worth directly with you. Sometimes, the most powerful way to make someone feel good about themselves happens when they are not even in the room. When a compliment comes directly from you to another person, it carries a certain weight, but it also carries the potential for bias. However, when a compliment travels through the grapevine, when a person hears from a mutual acquaintance that you spoke highly of them behind their back, it carries infinite credibility. It is the purest form of validation because it proves you were advocating for their brilliance when you had absolutely nothing to gain. By intentionally planting positive seeds about people to mutual friends, you create a golden filter of perception. When that person eventually interacts with you again, they will view your character through a lens of profound warmth and appreciation long before you even say hello. There is one final, beautifully counterintuitive method to elevate the people around you. Ask them for a small favor. Logic would dictate that if we want someone to like us, we should bend over backward to do favors for them. But human psychology operates on a different frequency. When we do something kind for another person, our brain justifies the action by telling us that the person we are helping is worthy of our time and effort. We subconsciously convince ourselves that we like them by asking someone for a small, manageable favor, like asking a new neighbor to watch your laptop for 30 seconds at a coffee shop, or asking a reserved colleague for their specific recommendation on a book. You give them an opportunity to be capable, generous, and helpful. You are not imposing on them. You are allowing them to experience their own goodness. Building a magnetic presence does not require you to be the most charismatic, wealthy, or fascinating person in the room. In fact, trying to be those things often pushes people away. True magnetism requires a profound, intentional generosity of spirit. It is the daily, quiet discipline of looking at the people around you and deciding to elevate their sense of self. When you master this core philosophy, you stop chasing connections. You start creating an environment where deep, meaningful connection is inevitable. People will naturally flock to you, not because they are mesmerized by your brilliance, but because in the warmth of your attention, they finally get to meet the best, most radiant version of themselves. Chapter 4. The Psychological Architecture of Attraction. Have you ever wondered why you feel an inexplicable pull towards certain people, while others who seem perfectly nice on paper leave you entirely cold? We often write this off as a mysterious force called chemistry. We assume it is a rare, mystical alignment of the stars, something the universe either grants us or denies us. But attraction, whether it is the spark of a new romance, the sudden click of a lifelong friendship, or the unspoken respect between business partners, is not a lottery. It is an architecture. It is built on a foundation of observable, masterable psychological laws. Once you understand these invisible forces, you realize that attraction is not something that just happens to you by accident. It is an environment you can intentionally create. One of the most pervasive myths in our culture is that opposites attract. It makes for a wonderful movie plot, but in the reality of human psychology, it is entirely backward. The first law of this architecture is the law of similarity. We are profoundly biologically drawn to people who are like us. To understand why, you have to understand how much the human brain despises conflict. When we hold a belief and someone challenges it, our mind experiences a state of friction and anxiety. It is exhausting to constantly defend your worldview. But when you meet someone who shares your passions, your perspectives, or even your peculiar sense of humor, that anxiety vanishes. You experience an incredible psychological relief. Imagine you are attending a local town hall meeting or volunteering at a community garden. You strike up a conversation with a stranger, and within minutes, you discover that you both share a frustrating, highly specific grievance about the neighborhood zoning laws, or perhaps a mutual obsession with a rare genre of music. In that instant, an invisible bridge drops between you. You feel validated. You feel safe. Your brain silently whispers that because this person thinks like you, they must be a good, intelligent, trustworthy human being. You do not need to share every single hobby with someone to trigger this law. You simply need to find the overlapping threads. When you actively seek and highlight the common ground between yourself and a stranger, you bypass years of awkward small talk and step directly into the realm of familiarity and trust. But what happens when you want to accelerate that feeling of connection? This brings us to a fascinating psychological quirk known as the law of misattribution. The human brain is a brilliant machine, but it is sometimes wonderfully terrible at identifying the true source of its own joy. When we engage in activities that release endorphins or adrenaline, like intense physical exercise, riding a thrilling amusement park ride, or even watching a terrifying movie, our heart rate elevates and our body is flooded with a profound sense of well-being. But the brain, swimming in these chemicals, often misattributes the source of the thrill. Instead of crediting the roller coaster or the heavy workout, it looks at the person standing right next to us and assumes, this person makes me feel incredibly alive. Think about the traditional uninspired first date. Two people sit across from each other at a quiet, brightly lit coffee shop, sipping lukewarm drinks and firing resume-style questions at one another. It is essentially a job interview with pastries. There is no biological thrill, no chemical rush. Now, picture those same two people navigating a complex escape room, hiking a steep, breathtaking mountain trail, or even simply attending a suspenseful theatrical play. Their hearts are pounding, they are sharing a heightened emotional state, and when it is over, they look at each other with flushed cheeks and bright eyes. The environment did the heavy lifting, but the individuals reap the profound relational rewards. If you want someone to feel a magnetic pull toward you, share an environment that naturally makes their heart beat a little faster. As this connection forms, you must also understand the delicate balance of how much of yourself to reveal. We often believe that to make someone like us, we must lay all our cards on the table immediately, but attraction thrives on the law of curiosity. Human beings are hardwired to solve mysteries. We are captivated by the unknown. If you pour out every detail of your life history, every fear, and every triumph within the first hour of meeting someone, you extinguish the mystery. You leave them with nothing to wonder about. Instead, think of sharing your life like dropping a trail of breadcrumbs in a vast forest. You offer a small, intriguing piece of yourself, a unique perspective, a hint of a past adventure, and then you stop. You let the other person pick it up. You let them ask questions. You let their imagination work. When you practice restraint in your self-disclosure, you become a puzzle they genuinely want to solve. This restraint naturally triggers another powerful force, the law of scarcity. We inherently value what is not readily available. If you are instantly available at all hours, immediately agreeing to every request and abandoning your own life to cater to a new acquaintance, your perceived value plummets. But when you maintain your own rich, independent life, occasionally stepping back and allowing the other person the space to pursue you, you trigger a deep motivational drive within them. They realize your time and attention are prizes to be won, not cheap commodities given away to just anyone. Perhaps the most counterintuitive law of all is the law of the rocky road. We assume that the best relationships must begin with instant harmony, and that a bad first impression spells doom forever. Yet, psychology tells us a different, beautifully redeeming story. Imagine two colleagues assigned to a high-stakes project. At first, their personalities clash. They argue over strategy, they misunderstand each other's motives, and the tension is palpable. But gradually, through the fire of the project, they are forced to listen. They begin to see the hidden strengths in each other's approaches. They compromise. When the project succeeds, they look at each other with a profound, hard-earned respect. Relationships that begin with friction and eventually find harmony are almost always stronger, deeper, and more resilient than those that begin perfectly smoothly. Why? Because the journey from friction to friendship requires effort, vulnerability, and a conscious choice to overcome prejudice. When you finally win over someone who initially doubted you, the psychological reward is massive for both of you. You have not just found a friend, you have earned an ally. The architecture of attraction is constantly operating in the background of your life. Every shared thrill, every discovered similarity, every moment of practiced restraint, and every overcome obstacle is a brick in the foundation of a lasting bond. You do not have to leave human connection to chance. By understanding these invisible laws, you can intentionally design relationships that are not only deeply fulfilling, but practically inevitable. Chapter 5. The Power of Intentional Listening. We live in a world entirely obsessed with noise. Everyone has a platform, everyone has a microphone, and everyone is desperate to be heard. If you walk into any restaurant or coffee shop and observe the tables around you, you will witness a fascinating, mildly tragic phenomenon. You will see people sitting across from one another, engaging in what looks like a conversation, but is actually just a series of alternating monologues. One person speaks and the other person remains quiet. But the quiet person is not truly listening. They are simply reloading. They are scanning the speaker's words, desperately searching for a keyword or a pause, so they can leap in and drag the spotlight back to their own experiences. We are a society starving for attention, yet bankrupt when it comes to offering it. Think back to the last time you truly felt heard. Not just acknowledged, not just politely agreed with, but deeply, completely, and profoundly understood. It probably felt like a cool drink of water after a long run. When someone truly listens to you, without judgment, without interruption, and without trying to immediately solve your problems, your defensive walls do not just lower, they evaporate. This kind of intentional listening is arguably the rarest and most powerful tool in the entire architecture of human connection. Yet, it is a skill that few people ever master, primarily because it requires something incredibly difficult, the temporary surrender of the ego. To become a master of connection, you must learn to silence the constant, frantic voice inside your head that begs you to prove how smart, how relatable, or how helpful you are. When someone comes to you with a problem or a story, your default instinct is likely to interrogate or to fix. This is a trap. Let us explore the interrogation trap first. When we want to know what someone is thinking or feeling, we usually bombard them with questions. We ask, "Why did you do that? What were you thinking? How are you feeling?" We believe we are showing interest, but human psychology interprets a barrage of questions as a threat. Think about the word why. When someone asks you why you made a certain decision, your brain instantly registers the question as a demand for justification. You feel a sudden, tiny spike of adrenaline. You feel the need to defend yourself. The moment someone feels defensive, the organic flow of the relationship is paralyzed. Instead of interrogating, the master of connection uses the art of the open observation. Rather than demanding information, you create a soft, inviting space for the other person to willingly offer it. Imagine a scenario involving a dedicated employee who has just walked out of a disastrous meeting. They spent weeks preparing a pitch, only to have the client tear it apart in front of the entire executive team. The employee returns to their desk, pale and visibly shaken. A well-meaning colleague might walk up and immediately start firing questions. "What happened in there? Are you okay? Why didn't you push back on their budget concerns?" The employee, already overwhelmed, will likely offer a short, defensive answer just to make the colleague go away. Now, imagine a different approach. A seasoned, empathetic mentor approaches the desk. They do not ask a single question. They do not demand a status report on the employee's emotional state. Instead, the mentor looks at the sheer exhaustion on the employee's face and makes a gentle, presumptive observation. They say, "It is incredibly disorienting when you pour your heart into a project and the room just does not see the vision." Notice the brilliance of this approach. There is no question to answer. There is no defense required. The mentor has simply placed a statement in the air, a statement that reflects the probable emotional reality of the employee. In that moment, the employee feels a profound sense of validation. The tension leaves their shoulders because they do not feel pressured to defend their failure. They are suddenly free to explore it. They will likely lean back, exhale a breath they did not know they were holding, and say, "Exactly. I was totally blindsided. I thought I had covered all the financial projections." the floodgates open. By refusing to ask a question, the mentor elicited the entire story, along with the employee's absolute trust. This technique relies on a fascinating quirk of human nature, the irresistible urge to correct the record and to expand on our own realities. When you make a presumptive statement, one of two things will happen. If you are right, the person will enthusiastically agree and expand on your observation, just like the employee in our scenario. But even if you are wrong, the technique still works flawlessly. If the mentor had said, "You must be furious with the client," the employee might respond, "Actually, I am not angry with the client. I am just disappointed in myself because I missed a crucial slide." Whether your observation is perfectly accurate or slightly off the mark, the result is the same. The other person opens up, shares their truth, and feels deeply respected in the process. But what happens when the other person stops speaking? This brings us to the most terrifying and underutilized tool in intentional listening: silence. Human beings despise conversational silence. To us, a pause feels like a failure. It feels awkward, heavy, and dangerous. The moment a sentence ends and a quiet gap opens up, we rush to fill it with anything we can find: a joke, a nervous laugh, or a sudden change of subject. We do this to relieve our own anxiety. If you can train yourself to simply sit in the quiet, to endure the momentary discomfort of an unfilled pause, you will unlock a treasure trove of human connection. When someone finishes telling you something, especially something difficult or deeply personal, do not immediately jump in. Just wait. Maintain soft, warm eye contact. Nod slightly. Count to 3 in your head. What happens in those 3 seconds is profound. The other person, feeling the space you have created, will often look inward. They will realize that you are not rushing them along, and very often they will take a deeper breath and reveal the thing they were actually afraid to say. The first thing a person tells you is almost always the polished, socially acceptable version of the truth. It is the headline. But the real story, the vulnerable core of what they are experiencing, always comes after the pause. Intentional listening is not a passive activity. It is not simply sitting quietly while waiting for your turn to speak. It is an intensely active, deeply compassionate form of observation. It requires you to listen to the tone of their voice, to watch the shifting of their posture, and to hear the heavy, unspoken words hiding between their sentences. When you master this, you become a sanctuary for the people around you. They will naturally gravitate to you because in your presence, they do not have to fight for the microphone. They simply get to exist, fully seen and fully heard. Once you have mastered the art of absorbing the world around you, once you have learned to read the silent signals and elicit truth without pressure, you are finally ready to open your mouth. You are ready to transition from the power of listening to the art of speaking, using your words, not to prove your own worth, but to resonate deeply with the psychological needs of everyone you meet. Chapter 6. The Art of Verbal Resonance. We have journeyed deeply into the profound power of silence. We have explored the architecture of the unspoken, the microscopic physical signals that broadcast safety, and the incredible, disarming magic of giving someone your absolute, undivided attention. But human connection cannot exist entirely in the quiet. Eventually, the pause must end. Eventually, you have to open your mouth. And the moment you do, you transition from being a brilliant observer to becoming an active architect of the relationship. The words you choose, the rhythm of your sentences, and the actual physical vibration of your voice will determine whether the bridge of connection you have built holds strong or collapses instantly. Think of conversation not as an exchange of information, but as a piece of music. When we are nervous, desperate to impress, or caught off guard, our conversational music becomes chaotic. We speak too fast, terrified that if we pause for even a second, we will lose our audience. Our pitch rises into a tight, strained register, subconsciously broadcasting anxiety and submission to everyone in the room. Without realizing it, we turn our sentences into a frantic, rushing river that forces the listener to paddle just to keep up. It is exhausting to listen to someone who speaks from a place of anxiety, and human beings naturally pull away from exhausting situations. To create deep verbal resonance, you must first master your instrument. You must learn to physically ground your voice. Imagine you are sitting in a quiet room with an old, trusted friend, late at night, long after the rest of the world has gone to sleep. Notice how your voice sounds in that specific scenario. It drops in pitch. The pace slows down. The spaces between the words become just as important as the words themselves. This lower, slower, resonant tone is the biological sound of absolute calm and unquestioned authority. When you intentionally lower your pitch and slow your delivery, even in the middle of a brightly lit, high-stress environment, you act as an emotional anchor for the entire room. You silently tell the listener's nervous system, "I am perfectly comfortable here, and you are safe to be comfortable with me." Once you have mastered the music of your delivery, you must turn your attention to the lyrics. The words we use are not just neutral carriers of data, they are highly charged emotional triggers. One of the most common ways we accidentally detonate a conversation is through our use of pronouns, specifically the adversarial divide between I and you. Picture a scenario where a group of dedicated community volunteers has spent 3 grueling weeks organizing a local festival. The weather has been terrible. Funding has fallen through, and morale is absolutely entirely depleted. Tensions are running high, and people are snapping at one another over minor details. The lead organizer needs to address the group. If they stand up and say, "I need you to work harder because I am tired of seeing this project fail," they have instantly drawn a battle line. The I is the dictator, and the you is the failing workforce. The volunteers will immediately cross their arms, their jaws will tighten, and resentment will flood the room. But what if that same organizer shifts the language, abandoning the adversarial pronouns and replacing them with the language of unity? Imagine they lower their voice, look around the room and say, "We have been hit with every obstacle imaginable, and it is incredibly frustrating for us right now. But if we can hold this together for 2 more days, we are going to look back on this as our finest hour." By simply adopting the word we, the organizer steps off the pedestal and directly into the trenches with them. The problem is no longer something one person is inflicting on another. It is a shared adversary that a united front must conquer. Collaborative language dissolves the ego and binds individuals together into a single, breathing organism. This collaborative approach is just as vital when you are conversing one-on-one, particularly when you need to keep the momentum of a conversation flowing without hijacking it. How do you encourage someone to keep opening up without interrogating them with endless questions? The answer lies in the subtle, incredibly elegant technique of the verbal echo. The human mind loves to be mirrored. It finds immense comfort in seeing its own thoughts reflected back. When someone is telling you a story and they reach a slight pause, perhaps searching for the right word or hesitating because the subject is sensitive, do not fill the silence with your own story. Do not ask a probing question. Instead, gently repeat the last 2 or 3 words they just said, using an upward, inquisitive inflection. Imagine an acquaintance is telling you about a recent career change. They say, "I just couldn't take the corporate environment anymore, so I decided to walk away and start fresh. It was absolutely terrifying." If you say, "I know, I hate corporate jobs too, you have stolen the spotlight," but if you simply look at them, nod softly and repeat their final words, "absolutely terrifying," you create pure conversational magic. The person will instantly feel validated, and without any prompting, they will enthusiastically pick up the thread and dive deeper. "Yes, terrifying, because I had no safety net, but I finally realized my peace of mind was more important." The echo acts as a gentle, frictionless nudge, keeping them squarely in the center of the narrative while requiring almost 0 effort on your part. As you use these tools, the grounded tone, the collaborative language, and the gentle echo, you will notice a profound shift in how people respond to you. They will linger longer in your presence. They will share things with you that they rarely share with anyone else. They will seek out your company because your words do not demand anything from them. Instead, your words create a spacious, resonant environment where they feel completely secure. But knowing how to establish this initial spark and build this profound rapport is only half of the journey. A brilliant conversation might make you memorable, but it does not automatically make you a permanent fixture in someone's life. To turn a fantastic interaction into a lasting alliance, you must know how to intentionally cross the threshold from a casual connection to a deeply rooted bond. You must learn the specific, deliberate steps required to take a fleeting spark of friendship and forge it into something unbreakable. Chapter 7. Bridging the Gap from Acquaintance to Ally. We all have them in our lives. They are the people who exist happily, comfortably, and permanently on the periphery of our world. Perhaps it is the co-worker whose weekend plans you always politely inquire about in the break room. Perhaps it's the fellow parent you stand next to every Saturday morning on the sidelines of a damp, freezing youth soccer field. You know their coffee order, you know the names of their children, and you genuinely enjoy the 10 minutes of cheerful banter you share each week. By all measurable standards, you have successfully built rapport. You have utilized proximity, frequency, and duration. You have mastered the silent language of trust and the art of verbal resonance. You like them, and they clearly like you. Yet, despite all of this positive momentum, an invisible wall remains firmly in place. You are trapped in the pleasant, shallow waters of acquaintanceship, unable to bridge the gap and turn a casual connection into a genuine, trusted ally. Why do so many of our interactions stall at this exact point? The answer lies in the psychological safety of boundaries. When we interact with someone in a specific recurring environment, like an office, a gym, or a neighborhood committee meeting, that environment acts as a protective container for the relationship. The context provides the script. You know exactly what to talk about, how long the interaction will last, and how to gracefully exit when the meeting ends or the workout is over. Moving beyond that container requires abandoning the script, and the human brain naturally perceives the loss of a script as a significant emotional risk. To transform an acquaintance into an ally, you must intentionally break the geographical boundary of your relationship. You must orchestrate a context shift. Imagine two people who walk their dogs in the same local park every morning at 6 o'clock. For an entire year, they have crossed paths, offered warm smiles, and engaged in delightful conversation about the weather, their pets, and the neighborhood. They have established a beautiful baseline of trust. But if neither of them ever takes a step outside the rigid structure of the morning dog walk, 5 years will pass and they will remain nothing more than friendly strangers. To break the boundary, one of them must introduce a slight, low-stakes context shift. It does not require a grand gesture or a formal invitation to dinner. It is as simple as saying, "There is a new bakery that just opened down the street, and I am going to grab a coffee there after I drop the dog back at the house. You should come with me." Notice the architecture of that invitation. It is casual, it is immediate, and most importantly, it offers a seamless exit strategy. If the other person declines, no permanent damage is done to the original relationship. They will simply resume their usual routine the next morning. But if they accept, something profound happens. The moment those two individuals sit down across from each other in a new environment, stripped of the dogs, the park, and their usual morning routine, the relationship instantly deepens. They are no longer just the people who walk the dogs. They are two humans consciously choosing to spend their time together. Once you have successfully shifted the context, you must initiate the second crucial phase of building an alliance: the vulnerability exchange. An acquaintance knows your accomplishments, your opinions on current events, and the polished version of your daily life. An ally knows your doubts, but you cannot simply dump your deepest fears onto someone over a cup of coffee and expect them to suddenly become your best friend. Vulnerability must be treated like a delicate, intricate dance of reciprocity. You begin by offering a small, authentic piece of your internal world. Instead of complaining about a difficult boss, which is a common but superficial bonding tactic, you share a genuine, minor insecurity. You might say, "I am giving a presentation to the executive board next week, and honestly, I am finding it incredibly intimidating. I always get entirely tongue-tied when the stakes are that high." When you place a piece of vulnerability on the table, you must stop talking and watch closely. You are testing the waters of the relationship. What does the other person do with the fragile truth you just handed them? An acquaintance will quickly try to cover it up with generic reassurance. They will say, "Oh, do not worry, you will be fine. You always do a great job." They are trying to be polite, but their response effectively shuts down the emotional depth of the conversation. They have politely declined the invitation to go deeper. An emerging ally, however, will recognize the emotional weight of what you just offered. They will pick it up carefully, and then, crucially, they will offer a piece of their own vulnerability in return. They will lean in and say, "I know exactly what you mean. The last time I had to speak in front of the board, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my notes. In that exact moment, the invisible wall between you shatters. You have both stepped out from behind your polished armor. You have established a mutual understanding that it is safe to be imperfect in each other's presence. This reciprocal exchange builds an incredibly strong foundation, but a true alliance requires one final defining element: the mastery of remembered details. We live in a society where everyone is perpetually distracted. We hear people speak, but the moment they leave the room, their words vanish from our memory. If you want to prove to someone that they are truly important to you, you must cultivate the discipline of carrying their words with you when they are not around. Think about a time you casually mentioned a minor detail in a conversation, perhaps a book you were hoping to find, a small anxiety you had about an upcoming family trip, or even a specific, obscure brand of tea that you love. Weeks later, you meet that person again. Before you can even say hello, they reach into their bag, hand you a box of that exact tea, and ask how the family trip went. The emotional impact of that moment is staggering. It is not about the physical gift. It is about the profound realization that you occupied a space in their mind even when you were not in their presence. They listened to you. They remembered your specific needs, and they took independent action to bring you joy. When you make a deliberate effort to remember the names of someone's children, the exact date of their stressful medical appointment, or the specific dietary restriction they briefly mentioned a month ago, you elevate yourself from an acquaintance to a true guardian of their well-being. You are silently telling them, "Your life matters to me." Bridging the gap from acquaintance to ally is not an accident of time or circumstance. It is a conscious, courageous choice. It requires the bravery to step outside of comfortable contexts, the willingness to be the first one to drop your armor, and the profound generosity to carry the details of someone else's life in your own memory. It is a beautiful risk, and it is the only way to build a circle of unshakable allies who will stand beside you when the easy, comfortable routines of daily life fall away. Chapter 8. Sustaining and Protecting Meaningful Bonds. We as a culture are entirely obsessed with the beginning of things. We write endless songs about the initial spark of romance, we celebrate the thrilling launch of a new business partnership, and we love the origin stories of great friendships. There is an undeniable magic in that initial phase, a rush of discovery and intoxicating energy when a stranger finally crosses the threshold to become an ally. But nobody throws a parade for a random Tuesday afternoon 7 years later. We rarely romanticize the quiet, unglamorous work of keeping a bond alive long after the initial excitement has faded. Yet this is where the true masterpiece of human connection is actually painted. Getting a connection is merely an event. Keeping it is a daily discipline. One of the most dangerous illusions in the human experience is the belief in relational permanence. We subconsciously assume that once we have secured a deep bond with someone, we can place that relationship on a metaphorical shelf and expect it to remain exactly as we left it. But human relationships are not static objects. They are living, breathing organisms. And like any living thing, they are subject to the universal law of entropy. If you are not actively feeding a relationship, it is actively starving. If you are not intentionally growing closer, you are inevitably drifting apart. Think about a friendship that was forged in the intense fires of early adulthood. Perhaps it was someone you navigated your first terrible job with, or someone who stood by you during a difficult life transition. For years, you were inseparable. You knew the cadence of their thoughts and the exact meaning behind their silences. Now, fast forward a decade, you still refer to each other as best friends. But if you look closely at the reality of your interactions, they have become hollow. You exchange obligatory birthday messages. You have rushed superficial dinners twice a year where you spend the entire evening reminiscing about the past because you have completely lost touch with who the other person is in the present. The relationship is surviving entirely on the fumes of history. To resurrect a bond like this, you must accept a hard truth. The person sitting across from you is no longer the person you met 10 years ago, and you are not the same either. To sustain the bond, you must stop relying on the ghost of your past connection and actively choose to get to know this new version of them. You must deliberately reintroduce the foundational pillars that built the relationship in the first place, creating new proximity, committing to consistent frequency, carving out uninterrupted duration, and bringing genuine intensity back into your conversations. You cannot coast on old emotional investments. You must make new deposits today. This brings us to the concept of the emotional bank account, a hidden ledger that dictates the survival of every long-term bond. Every time you actively listen, remember a small detail, offer a genuine compliment, or show up when it is inconvenient, you are making a deposit into this account. Every time you are late, dismissive, overly critical, or distracted by your phone during a conversation, you are making a withdrawal. When the skies are clear and life is easy, the balance of this account might not seem critical, but eventually the storms of conflict will arrive. In any meaningful, long-term relationship, you will eventually misunderstand, disappoint, or deeply hurt each other. It is an unavoidable byproduct of two imperfect human beings sharing their lives. When a severe conflict hits, it is a massive withdrawal from the emotional bank account. If you have spent years diligently making small, consistent deposits of trust and affection, the relationship will absorb the blow. The account will dip, but it will not go bankrupt. However, if you have neglected the relationship, taking the other person for granted and allowing the balance to hover near zero, even a minor disagreement can bounce the check and destroy the bond forever. Navigating this inevitable conflict requires mastering the most difficult psychological challenge of long-term relationships, the suppression of the ego during emotional flooding. When we feel attacked or misunderstood by someone we care about, our brain essentially short-circuits. The logical, reasonable part of our mind shuts down, and the ancient, primitive threat response system takes over. We are flooded with adrenaline. We stop listening to understand, and we start listening strictly to destroy the other person's argument. Trying to resolve a deeply emotional dispute when either person is in this flooded state is like trying to build a house in the middle of a hurricane. It is impossible, and it will only result in massive structural damage. When the fire of anger flares in a long-term bond, the most powerful thing you can do is hit the pause button. You must have the discipline to say, "This relationship is too important to me to have this conversation while we are both so angry. Let us step away and talk about this tomorrow." When the storm has passed and logic returns, you must approach the resolution with a completely shifted paradigm. In an argument with an ally, the goal can never be to win. If you deploy your superior debating skills, corner the other person, and force them to admit utter defeat, you might feel a fleeting rush of triumph. But look at the cost. You just humiliated someone you love. You just inflicted a deep, emotional wound on your own ally. If you win the argument but damage the trust, you have ultimately lost. Instead of positioning yourself across from them as an adversary, you must mentally move to their side of the table. You look at the conflict not as me versus you, but as us versus the problem. You use the incredibly powerful tool of acknowledging their reality, even if you fiercely disagree with their conclusion. You say, "I completely understand why my actions made you feel disrespected. That was never my intention, but I see clearly why it hit you that way." When you validate their emotional experience, the anger dissolves. You are no longer an enemy trying to invalidate their feelings. You are a partner trying to understand them. Protecting a meaningful bond requires immense humility. It is the willingness to apologize first, even when you feel you are only partially at fault. It is the quiet discipline of doing the small, unglamorous things day after day to ensure the other person feels seen, valued, and safe. Sustaining a relationship is the truest test of character because it happens in the shadows, long after the excitement of the initial connection has faded. Yet, as we master the art of nurturing these deeply human bonds in the physical world, we find ourselves confronting a completely new, unprecedented challenge. We are living in an era where the vast majority of our interactions no longer happen face-to-face, but through the glowing glass of screens. How do we translate the silent language of trust, the deep resonance of verbal communication, and the careful architecture of intimacy into a digital landscape that is inherently cold, distant, and stripped of human nuance? Chapter 9. Navigating Trust in a Virtual World. We carry a profound paradox in our pockets. With a simple swipe across a piece of illuminated glass, you can instantly transmit a message to someone on the opposite side of the planet. We are more connected than any generation in the history of the human race. Yet, if you ask the average person walking down the street, they will likely tell you that they feel an unprecedented level of isolation. We have built an incredible global infrastructure for exchanging information, but in the process, we have severely compromised our ability to exchange humanity. Think about the massive toolkit we have built so far, the subtle eyebrow flash, the gentle tilt of the head, the warm, crinkling smile, the low, resonant pitch of a grounded voice. These are the biological instruments of trust. They have governed human connection for millions of years, but what happens when you strip all of those instruments away? What happens when you are forced to build trust, navigate conflict, and establish deep rapport using nothing but a string of black text on a white screen? This is the great challenge of the digital age. When you communicate through text messages, emails, or direct messages, your words arrive completely naked. They are entirely devoid of tone, pitch, volume, and facial expression, and this creates a massive psychological vulnerability. The human brain absolutely despises ambiguity. When the brain receives a piece of information that is missing crucial context, it will not simply leave the puzzle unsolved, it will immediately manufacture a narrative to fill in the blanks. Because we are hardwired for survival, the narrative our brain chooses to manufacture is almost always negative. Imagine you have spent 3 days carefully drafting a proposal for a major client. Or perhaps you sent a long, vulnerable text message to a romantic partner trying to resolve a delicate argument. You hit send, you wait. An hour later, your phone buzzes. You look down and see a single word reply. Fine. Think about the visceral, physiological reaction that happens in your body in that exact moment. Your stomach drops. Your heart rate accelerates. You immediately assume they are furious. You read that word, fine, with a sarcastic, cold, and aggressive inner voice. You spend the next 2 hours spiraling into anxiety, preparing for a massive confrontation. But what if the person who sent that message was simply rushing through a busy airport, carrying heavy luggage, and hastily typed fine with a smile on their face, genuinely meaning, this looks absolutely fine to me, great job? In the digital world, the emotional tone of your message is almost never decided by you, the sender. It is entirely decided by the current mood, insecurities, and physical environment of the person receiving it. This is why attempting to resolve deep emotional conflicts via text is practically guaranteed to fail. You are handing the other person a blank canvas, and if they are already angry, they will paint your words with the darkest possible colors. To navigate the virtual world safely, you must become incredibly deliberate. You must over-communicate your emotional intent. In the physical world, a warm smile softens a blunt statement. In the digital world, you have to write the warmth directly into the sentence. Instead of sending a rapid-fire transactional email that says, "Send me the report by 3 o'clock." A master of digital connection takes an extra 10 seconds to apply the golden rule. They write, "I know you have a massive amount on your plate today, but if you could get that report to me by 3, it would be a lifesaver. Thank you for always keeping this project on track. You have accomplished the exact same logistical goal, but you have infused the cold digital space with empathy and appreciation." But miscommunication is only one side of the digital coin. The other, much more dangerous side is the illusion of intimacy. The internet is a highly curated theater. When we interact with someone strictly through an online persona, we are not seeing a complete human being. We are seeing a highlight reel. We are seeing the version of themselves they desperately want the world to believe is true. Because the digital world allows for absolute control over pacing, people can perfectly manufacture the architecture of attraction. Remember the law of similarity? In the physical world, discovering common ground is a beautiful, organic process. But online, someone can easily study your digital footprint, learn your exact preferences, your political leanings, and your obscure hobbies, and then perfectly mirror them back to you. You meet someone on a professional networking site or a dating app, and suddenly it feels like you have met your soulmate. They love the exact same obscure jazz musicians you love. They share your exact philosophical views on life. They always know exactly the right thing to say. The temptation is to dive headfirst into this connection because the human ego desperately craves validation. We want so badly to be seen and understood that we willingly ignore the red flags. But you must remember that online, it requires zero emotional intelligence to be the perfect match. It only requires a search engine and a few hours of research. The danger of digital relationships is that we fall profoundly in love with the idea of a person long before we actually meet the reality of the person. This is why you must protect your emotional bank account when interacting with someone you have never met face to face. You must enforce the law of the context shift. If a digital relationship is going to evolve into a genuine alliance, it must eventually survive the harsh, unedited light of the real world. A true ally will welcome the transition from the screen to a phone call, from a phone call to a video chat, and eventually to a shared physical space. If someone constantly resists breaking the digital boundary, offering endless excuses for why they cannot speak on the phone or meet in person, they are sending you a glaring signal. They are telling you that the persona they have constructed online cannot survive the spontaneous, uncontrollable reality of a real-world interaction. The virtual world is an incredible tool for establishing proximity and maintaining the frequency of a relationship. It allows us to stay tethered to loved ones across oceans and to cast a wide net for new alliances. But it is only a bridge. It is not the destination. You can build the scaffolding of trust over a Wi-Fi connection, but the heavy structural steel of a true bond must be forged in the real world. As you move through your digital life, treat every email, every text, and every online interaction as a precious opportunity to be the exception to the rule. In a landscape filled with cold, rushed, and highly curated facades, dare to be the person who brings genuine warmth to the screen. Dare to be the one who pauses before hitting send, ensuring that the human being on the other side of the glass feels respected and valued. When you master the art of navigating this virtual terrain, you complete your toolkit. You have learned how to speak the silent language of the body, how to elevate others through the golden rule, how to navigate the messy realities of long-term conflict, and how to project your warmth through the cold expanse of the internet. There is only one thing left to do. It is time to take all of these invisible forces, all of these profound psychological laws, and weave them into the fabric of your everyday life. It is time to become a permanent force of positive influence in the world. Chapter 10. The Mastery of Everyday Influence. We have journeyed deeply through the invisible architecture of human connection. We have taken the seemingly magical spark of chemistry and broken it down into its elemental parts. We have explored the silent subconscious signals that broadcast trust across a crowded room, and we have learned the profound power of yielding the spotlight so that others might feel brilliant in your presence. We have mapped out the psychological laws of attraction, the delicate dance of turning acquaintances into fierce allies, and the quiet, daily discipline required to keep those bonds alive through the inevitable storms of life. But a blueprint, no matter how detailed or magnificent, is completely useless if you never pour the concrete. The profound danger of learning the mechanics of human behavior is the temptation to treat this knowledge purely as an intellectual exercise. It is easy to sit back and analytically observe the people around you, silently diagnosing their defensive postures or noting their poor conversational habits. But to do so is to entirely miss the point. These principles were not designed to make you a passive observer of human nature. They were designed to make you an active architect of it. The true mastery of these tools happens the moment you step out your front door and decide to transform this knowledge from a strategy into a permanent lifestyle. To master everyday influence, you must first change how you view the background actors of your life. Most of us navigate our daily routines locked inside a protective, invisible bubble. We walk through grocery stores, navigate public transit, and stand in crowded elevators, treating the strangers around us either as obstacles to be avoided or as mere fixtures of the environment. We save our emotional energy, our smiles, and our active listening exclusively for our inner circle. But imagine what happens when you flip that script. Imagine treating every single mundane encounter as an opportunity to practice the art of elevation. Picture a Tuesday morning at a busy, understaffed local coffee shop. The barista behind the counter is exhausted, rushing to fulfill a massive line of orders while dealing with impatient commuters. When it is finally your turn, the default social script dictates a transactional exchange. You state your order, hand over your payment, and stare at your phone until your name is called. Instead, you consciously choose to break the script. As you step up to the register, you offer a subtle, fractional eyebrow flash of recognition. You allow a genuine, eye-crinkling smile to spread across your face. You angle your body openly toward them, and instead of just barking an order, you use an empathic statement. You look at the chaotic environment and say, "It takes an incredible amount of focus to keep this entire line moving so smoothly when it is this busy." You are not doing this because you want a free coffee. You are not trying to manipulate them into giving you preferential treatment. You are doing it because for those brief 30 seconds, you have the absolute power to change the chemical state of that barista's brain. In the middle of a grueling shift where they feel like an invisible machine, you have made them feel seen, competent, and deeply human. The beautiful hidden reward of this practice is the psychological lift it gives to you. When you intentionally broadcast warmth and validation into the world, your own brain registers that positive environment. You leave the coffee shop feeling a surge of genuine joy simply because you chose to be a beacon of goodwill in a stressed-out world. As you practice these tools on strangers, they will become second nature, allowing you to deploy them effectively in the highest stakes environments of your life. Perhaps nowhere is this mastery more critical than in repairing the frayed edges of relationships that have begun to fail. We all have dynamics in our lives that feel hopelessly gridlocked. A tense relationship with a sibling, a profoundly difficult manager at work, or a neighbor with whom we have locked horns. Our instinct is usually to force a grand dramatic confrontation to clear the air, or to simply avoid the person entirely. But the master of connection knows that you do not rebuild a collapsed bridge by throwing a boulder across the river. You rebuild it plank by plank. If you have an estranged relationship, you do not need a fiery debate. You simply return to the foundation. You gently reintroduce proximity without demanding interaction. You slowly increase the frequency of low-stakes contact. A brief, warm smile in the hallway, a short, pressure-free message of goodwill. You ensure that when you do interact, your body language is flawlessly open and non-threatening. You use collaborative language instead of adversarial pronouns. By systematically applying the foundational pillars of connection, you bypass the defensive ego and speak directly to their subconscious, slowly proving that the environment is safe again. You give them the space to step back into the relationship on their own terms, guided by the irresistible warmth of your patience. Inevitably, as you begin to wield this level of social mastery, you will confront a vital ethical question. When you possess the ability to read people perfectly, to bypass their defenses and to make them feel an intense magnetic draw toward you, what separates profound influence from dark manipulation? The line between the two is razor thin, and it rests entirely on a single word: intent. Manipulation is the architecture of extraction. A manipulator uses the eyebrow flash, the empathic statement, and the illusion of similarity to draw someone in solely to take something from them, whether it is money, status, a favor, or a temporary boost to their own fragile ego. The manipulator views the other person as a chess piece, and while manipulation might work in the short term, the human subconscious is brilliant at eventually detecting a counterfeit. When someone realizes they have been played, the bridge is not just burned, it is eradicated. True influence, however, is the architecture of elevation. When your genuine intent is to leave every person you meet a little better, a little more confident, and a little more understood than they were before you arrived, manipulation becomes impossible. You are not extracting value, you are freely generating it. The core philosophy of making others feel profoundly good about themselves is the ultimate ethical safeguard. When you make someone the star of their own story, you both win. The connection is pure, the trust is real, and the loyalty you generate will be entirely unbreakable. You now possess a complete transformative toolkit. You know that walking into a room is no longer a roll of the dice. You are no longer at the mercy of luck, hoping that you might stumble into a good conversation or accidentally make a friend. You are the architect of the atmosphere. You have the power to disarm the guarded, to comfort the anxious, and to draw out the absolute best in the people around you. You know how to sit in the quiet with someone who is hurting, using your silence to offer them a sanctuary. You know how to navigate the cold, distant corridors of the digital world and inject them with authentic human warmth. At the end of our lives, when the noise fades and the rush of daily ambition slows down, the quality of our existence will not be measured by the titles we held or the arguments we won. It will be measured entirely by the quality of the bonds we forged. It will be measured by the people who felt safer, taller, and more alive simply because we were in the room. Do not leave your human connections to chance. Step out into the world, drop your armor, and intentionally build the relationships you desire. Speak the silent language of trust. Listen with profound intention. Elevate the people around you. You have the blueprint. Now, go build a life surrounded by genuine, unbreakable allies.